thanks for accepting the invitation and being on the platform. Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. Pleasure to be here.
As a dean of one of the premium sort of B schools in India, not just in India but across the globe, right? So how did you handle the whole the pandemic, and as a dean or the head of the institution, how did you handle the situation?
It's not how did we handle it, how are we still handling it? Because a bit of a moving target. I think like any other school, we faced the situation of uncertainty. And, our new batch of students, they were hosting a conference and they titled it sort of, how do you build an airplane while you're flying it? And this is the analogy that we used to draw about 30 years ago when I was at University of Texas at Austin, and we had the Austin Technology Incubator. And that is what entrepreneurs talk about, you're building your business while you're running it. And so, but I think during the pandemic, it's like, how do you repair your plane while you're flying it in bad weather and you have to figure out how to land it? Okay. And anybody who's been a pilot knows it's easier to take off than it is to land. But having to land in bad weather while you're fixing the problems with the plane is a different story. So it's been like that. The big thing is that, for in any situation that is posing uncertainty, you have to be agile. Okay, you have to listen to the market. And so obviously, our program normally starts around the middle of April, and the pandemic came in middle of March. And we had to figure out how to reset the date, but also how are we going to reconfigure. And there was no certainty related to when the campus would be allowed to open and what we could do, what we could not do. But it was very clear that the new version of the program, the adapted version of the program, is going to have to be more digital in nature. And then the question is, how do you ensure that while you have a hybrid program, digital plus face-to-face, and within digital, synchronous versus asynchronous, what you cannot let happen is the quality of the learning process to go down the tubes. So you really have to rethink. So in many universities, of course, the capstone course is usually at the end of the year, right? So in our case, we said, look, if our first term is going to be digital, then you cannot have the same duration. You can't, like a term structure is usually 6 weeks per term. We have 8 terms. You cannot do in 6 weeks the digital format. So we made that 10 weeks, instead of 6 weeks. And our orientation typically is a week. But since we're going to have to do breakout rooms, this, that, and the other digitally, we made the orientation 2 weeks. So the first 6 weeks of the program got stretched into, 12 weeks, because we wanted to make sure that the students were able to form the groups, to be able to form the relationships and so on. So it's a lot different from simply teaching online. So when you talk to people about an online program, the first thing that comes to their mind is somebody just talking to the computer.
Right.
Okay? Right. So, the people have visions, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there are many, many online programs where the instructor is simply talking, usually takes a pause, poses a question, then comes back to the answers to those questions and so on. But what we wanted to do was to actually figure out how to do it right. So one of the things we did was we decided to launch a program, and this is where the faculty creativity comes in. We called it Jumpstart India at ISB. So this is ISB students working with faculty on things that mattered at the state level, some issues that mattered at the central government level. But as a school, we have to contribute anyway to nation building. And we said this is a good way to come up with a project. So what happens now, instead of a capstone course being at the end of the year, what we did was we put a course that required multidisciplinary thinking right at the beginning of the year. But this also allowed the students to get to know each other. Faculty also have to learn, it's not that all of us are born geniuses or something like that. We have to figure out how to use the medium properly. And at the same time, we had to transform the school. We had to build in studios, and we needed to not just be talking to a camera, so we needed to look at a 3-camera perspective, etc. So a lot of learning has gone on. And so this is on the delivery side, the design side and the delivery side. There's also a big difference, if you will, on how you market it and how you maintain student interest. So during the time when we didn't know when we were going to open, we started having conversations with the students. We brought in our board members to talk about what was happening in their industry. We got visiting faculty from abroad. We got a local faculty to do sessions. I myself did a session on pricing just to give them a flavor. But we don't want it to be ISB online. We wanted people to think of it as ISB digital interactive. Okay, it's not. I mean, the beauty of being at ISB is we debate things. So in management, there's no one set answer. So what we need in management schools is interactivity in the classroom. And what that actually means, Kashyap, is the economies of scale are going to be lower. You can't have 60 people in a classroom if you're in the digital front. So literally what we have to do is we have to run smaller classes, and people think, oh, digital, oh, the economies of scale. Well, it's economies of scale if you're just talking to the computer. But if you're trying to interact with the computer, I can't have a conversation with you if it's a one-way conversation.
Excellent. You covered a lot of innovative models on how, you personalize the whole effect of learning. It's not just enough if you just use technology, right? I think at the end of the day, it's humans talking to humans. You mentioned any institution of eminence works for the nation building at large. And, this projects that you mentioned that, that you contributed to the government. So anything specific in terms of the COVID action committee, or, specifically to say Arogya Setu, or any such things you can think of?
These are projects actually being run by 18 different faculty members. So some are for the state of Tamil Nadu, some are Telangana, some are Andhra Pradesh, some are Punjab. And so, different people have been involved in different projects. But also at the school level, if you want to, I can talk more about the kinds of things I've been involved in. So what we've been looking at, if you look at ISB, there's a program that Prime Minister has been talking about for a while called GYAN, Global Indian Academic Network. Well, ISB is the original GYAN, right? That's how we started. We started with 0 residential faculty because when you start a school, you don't have any faculty. It's all visiting faculty. Yeah. So one of the things that the country is looking at right now is you've got a lot of Indian diaspora floating around. So whether we're talking about computer science, or we're talking about mechanical engineering, or we're talking about finance, or you're talking about marketing, you've got Indian faculty or Indian scientists that are spread globally. So one of the things that we have been working on is, and I was chairing this particular what was being called the vertical. I was chairing the management vertical. So there'd be a computer science vertical. There would be a vertical on photonics or whatever. There were the 18 topics. So management was only one of the 18 topics. And what we were doing is looking at ways in which academia and industry and government could get together to create industry clusters, right? So, we could have an industry cluster in healthcare and pharma. We could have an industry cluster looking at, how does one use digital technologies in education. So, you look at EdTech, why should there be perhaps down the line a special economic educational zone, those kind of issues. But the main thing was, how do you bring Indian diaspora faculty with residential faculty from India, and how can the two work together so we can But it's not really meant to be a one-way street. It's not like the diaspora helping, what's going on, helping, people who are residential faculty. It can also be the other way around. So, for example, if you take healthcare, our healthcare delivery costs are the lowest in the world. And the quality is not bad. When you look at the recovery rate for things like cataract operations, or you're looking at stents and so on. So there's something that the West can learn from us in terms of process knowledge, in terms how to do things well, but at a fraction of the cost. Now, what we may pick up in the process of working with faculty based abroad is what are some of the cutting edge things that they may be doing because they have more money that can be spent on, let's say, equipment than we do. So there's, there has to be a trade, if you will. So that's the kind of thing that I have been working on. Other people have been looking at, how do you use AI/ML to improve security, and how do we help the police force use data to improve the security in cities. So all kinds of projects.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. So you actually mentioned about, it's not ISB online, but ISB interactive, right? I think so. Along those lines, we see new models, right? Rather innovative models of a do-it-yourself sort of an MBA, floated by very famous people like Simon Sinek, or we have something called as the Alt MBA, the Power MBA, and so they are 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 14 weeks. A feel of MBA is what they promise, and they connect you to people around the world, right? How do you see that as a B school, right, which is physical? Probably, ISB is one of the very few institutions that has a 1-year PGP program for an MBA, right? So given that there is more online right now, it's kind of the thing that people got used to. Post pandemic, I think it's become a little more. So, I mean, as somebody like ISP, right, how would you look at players like these that are coming up? They offer a course, for example, an MBA, a virtual MBA kind of a micro degree or a micro master's program, right? And so how do you look at these, an emergence of these startups, so to speak?
See, you really have to get back to the value of education. What we teach is not how to do something. We teach why something needs to be done. And for 40 years, I've been in education 40. I started teaching in 1978, and so that's how long I've been in this game. And the role of education, the role of the kind of education that we're offering, is not saying here's a kitab or here's a PDF and here's a link, read it. Okay,
Yeah.
what the important thing about having the interactive dialogue in class, whether it is online or offline, doesn't matter. But if it is interactive, what we're doing is we are discussing, why we need to do things a particular way. Maybe Hindustan Unilever is doing something in a particular way, and we do a case study. It is not meant to say that this is how Unilever does it, and therefore you should do it that way. It should, our focus really is what can we learn from Unilever or Microsoft or whatever it may be, and say, what would you do it even better? Okay. So, and that dialogue has to take place. Now, I mentioned that, okay, I've been at this game for 42 years. Let's round it down to 40. If I'm teaching a class with 60 students, let's say, and the average, let's say an executive MBA class, and the average experience is 60 multiplied by 15 years is 900 years of experience in that classroom. I only have 40. All right, okay, you say, okay, my experience has been very focused, so okay, it's worth double that. So, so you take me up from 40 to 80. I'm still less than one-tenth of the insight that can be offered from the class. So my job is really to help the class squeeze out what they learn. And so that is why it has to be interactive. There isn't one set solution. It's not like Newton when the apple fell on his head. Gravity always works in one direction. But the problem with the marketplace is that customers change, the competition changes, and what worked yesterday and what was a case study yesterday, a brilliant case study yesterday, is the biggest bet tomorrow. All right. So So anyway, I mean, you asked me a short question, I gave a long answer. I think the value is going to be in the learning process, but I do agree that when we look at the rate of change in the marketplace, whether we're talking about the fintech, or we're talking about educational technology, or we're talking about medical technology, the rate of change has accelerated. Because the rate of change has accelerated, knowledge that is 3 or 4 years old may be too old. For example, in our finance classes 5 years ago, we were not doing blockchain, right? And so what we also need is we need a mechanism through short courses and so on, people can update. So our next move actually is going to be towards lifelong learning, right? Because by the time you get your MBA and you spend another 3 years, you're outdated. And we've seen this happening in the tech sector, that if you're in the tech sector, if you're in the IT sector, and you have not updated your thinking in 3 or 4 years, you're pretty much out of business. Okay. So it'll be in shorter learning modules, but that is the relearning and the continuous learning. Regarding the MBA programs, if you look at places like Wharton or Harvard, are they having any trouble filling the classes?
Absolutely no, I guess.
Okay. So the point really is that many of these online kind of ideas that are coming out, the Power MBA, this, that, and the other, they're very useful. And so I don't want to be negative. I think they're very useful. The other thing to keep in mind is that India is not the United States. In the US, there are God knows how many universities that are a legacy system resisting change. In India, we went from landline to smartphones within a decade. When I was growing up, I grew up in Lucknow. I still remember the phone number. The phone number that we had was 3313. 4 digits, huh? Which means in all of Lucknow in the 60s, there had to be less than 9,999 phones. That was the limit with 4 digits. Okay. Now what we see is a very, very different kind of scenario. And in telecom, we leapfrog. In healthcare, we are leapfrogging. And we will see a lot of leapfrogging that will occur in education. And things that did not work in the US, the completion rate of online programs was very low and so on. But in the US, they had other options. They could go to a community college, they could go to a university, they could do this, they could do that. In India, the options are more limited. The market is huge. And if I were an investor, which I am, I would invest in edutech. But the kind of investment ISB has to do is different from the Power MBA people, okay? Because our reputation is actually in the hands of the students, the alumni, and how well the alumni does is really a benchmark for what people can expect.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about, the research side of things. I mean, you've mentioned a lot about the research, the culture of research and the kind of case studies that you get. I mean, not just to, as a pedagogy or an education, but you also contribute to the industry at large, right? So what's been the recipe of ISB to, make these collaborations happen and, have these center for research, for example? You have, focus on now blockchain, as you mentioned. You have an IT kind of focus on various emerging tech like AI or ML, right? And we see that a lot of relevance is there, for future managers. The earlier sort of management was more, the decisions were made with more human thinking, but now I think machines are also being heavily deployed for easing the decision making, so to speak. I mean, can you just give some insight about how to think about this as a B school?
I think what it comes back to governance. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you join ISB as a faculty member, as a junior faculty member, you've got 7 years to prove that you can compete against the best globally. Okay, so which means, can you publish in the leading journals like Marketing Science? Can you publish in Academy of Management Review? These are top journals. There's something called the UT Dallas Top 24 list. These are the top 24 journals regarded by academia in the world. And then there's the FT50, which is the UT Dallas 24 plus another 26. Now, in order to get promoted from assistant professor to associate professor at ISB, if you can't publish in the leading journals globally, it's not going to happen. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Over 50% of junior faculty don't make it from assistant to associate. And that ratio is not at all different compared to when I was at the University of Texas or Emory University and later at Singapore Management University. So the culture is of research, and the research is not simply doing another study or replicating somebody else's study. The culture is original thinking. Okay?
Yeah.
So now that is what we use to promote people. And we're kind of very proud of the fact that when it comes to per capita productivity in the world's leading journals, ISB faculty is number 20. You know, we're a much smaller school. In my first school, University of Texas, we had 300 faculty, you know, at the business school. ISB at the moment is 71. But when you looked at the per capita productivity, then we are number 20 in the world, and we're the top school outside of North America when it comes to research productivity. Now, how does it all translate into the classroom? You know, what it does is it forces, us, I mean, the way our mindset is, we engage the students into questions that need to be answered. And so for example, if we are looking at accounting metrics, every university teaches a course in financial statement analysis. The price to book ratio of Hindustan Unilever is 60-1. The market price is worth 60 times the book value. So the question is, if the book value, if the balance sheet value is 2% of Hindustan Unilever, what is the remaining 98%? So that is the kind of question that we debate. And it turns out the answer is it's in the value of your distribution networks, it's in the value of your brands, it's the value of the human capital. These are all off-balance sheet assets. These are assets. You need them to compete, but they don't exist on the balance sheet. Now, ISB is not a listed company, but if I'm willing to bet if there was a market to book value for ISB, it would be at least 10-1, because the value of the intellectual property, it is the value of our alumni network, it is the value of our reputation, the brand, and none of these things exist on the balance sheet. So if you learn too much accounting, you create something that I call a type 3 error. Okay, type 1 error is concluding something is in the tails of a distribution, concluding something is wrong when in fact it's right. Type 2 error is concluding something is right when in fact it's wrong. Type 3 error is measuring the wrong variable or solving the wrong problem. Okay, so if you were to manage, Unilever or ITC or Microsoft, by the financial statements, you'd be making a big mistake.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So in terms of, the content, purely, let's say, the case studies that you deal, that you get at ISB, right? So how do you see in terms of, global sort of a globalized sort of content in terms of the case studies or the companies that you're talking of, versus, the Indian side kind of the context, right? We see that a lot of ISBNs get placed in, MNCs. I mean, the companies that are outside India, right, which have operations, say, in Singapore. Or so how do you manage to kind of give relevance to the cases that are outside India, or the international sort of cases?
Well, number one, the important thing is frameworks. If I look at what's happening in due to digital platforms, okay, we can look at Alipay, or we can look at Tencent from China. We could be looking at Amazon from the US, or we could look at Jio from India, and we could be analyzing what is going to be the impact of the Jio-Facebook alliance. These are the kinds of things that we are dealing with. These are things we are very actively dealing with. When a couple of years ago we had Walmart, purchase Flipkart. Those are the
Yeah.
kinds of things we were questioning, because the frameworks that we have developed over time, they are applicable to outside of India, but they're also applicable to India. Frankly, the world is not going to ask ISB to tell us, what the hell is happening in the UK. Why would people turn to us for insights? They want to know what's happening with Geo. They want to know what's happening at Tata's. Okay.
Right.
So we really have to develop some insights that are coming out of India and saying, what is it that the rest of the world can learn from India? Because we spend too much time saying, what can we learn from the foreign case studies? The reality is that the diversity in India is so high. In the US, everything is a city. New York City, Kansas City, Salt Lake City, etc., etc. There's not much difference between New York City and Kansas City compared to where I grew up. I grew up in Lucknow. On my way to IIT Kanpur, there was a small town called Unnao. Just those three cities, Lucknow, Kanpur, and Unnao, with very, very much greater diversity. Now then you start looking at Uttar Pradesh and you look at Tamil Nadu, there's linguistic diversity, there's cultural diversity. So in India, there's a lot to be learned, and we probably know how to manage diversity better than anybody else. And I joke somebody was asking me, how come Indian managers do so well abroad? Okay, you see, whether it is Microsoft or we're talking about Google and now IBM, the heads of these institutions, these companies are Indians. So half joking, but I was half serious. I said, look, in India, things are so complex that when you get out of India, you say, oh, all this is pretty simple compared to the complexities, because the marketing campaign that you develop for Kolkata, for West Bengal, is not going to work in Gujarat, I can tell you that. And so,
right. We've seen that engineering degree, right, with a BTech, with a very generic kind of skill sets, with not core competencies in, say, problem solving or very specific kind of coding skills. Now, I think with a lot of automation, right, a lot of these skills that were once kind of thought of skills were no longer relevant. So when you talk of a degree like MBA or probably a management degree, right, the most important skill set is the right mindset, the problem solving sort of ability, or the creativity or the innovative sort of mindset, right? I mean, in view of AI, replacing a lot of areas like analysis, or at one point they were done by managers or people with an MBA degree, but now certain tasks actually are replaced by either software or bots, right? So in view of this, right, I mean, as a leading B school, a generic kind of degree, say in marketing or finance, versus a degree that is coupled with some specific skills. So according to you, what could be those skills that could be that could make sort of MBAs more relevant in the future?
About engineering, it's like, I'm an engineer by training too. I, went to IIT Kanpur. I'm a bona fide mechanical engineer. I'll show you my degree. What did I learn in mechanical engineering? This is close to 50 years ago. That is still relevant. What we learned is that if a piece of machinery, let's say a car, if it wasn't working, you learned something called troubleshooting. Okay, is it the points? Is it is it the plug, spark plug, this, that? You took one. You learn to compartmentalize problems, and then you try to put everything together and so you try to work out a solution. What do you think we do in business? We do the same damn thing. If something isn't working, you have to figure out why it isn't working. Is there something wrong with the product design? Is it something wrong with the marketing message? Is the pricing wrong? Is there distribution that needs attention? You still have to break it up into smaller pieces and try to resolve the problem. So what is important in management is critical thinking. Now let's go back to your second question. I'm really tired of the AI ML taking over the world. So there's artificial intelligence, and what I talk about is augmented intelligence. You throw some data into the computer, it will find something for you. So for example, if I throw in data on the price of liquor in Jamaica, and the salaries of ministers in the church in Jamaica, I will find a positive correlation. AI will find that correlation, I guarantee you. Because of the salaries of the monks going up, the price of liquor is increasing. Now, all that is nonsense. So what we look for, that the patterns that you're picking up from AI. By the way, the work that I was doing for my thesis was based on Bayesian statistics. It was a clustering mechanism. That same methodology was also being used in computer science. And what I was calling cluster analysis, computer science called it pattern recognition. A lot fancier. You fast forward, what we then did in Bayesian statistics got known as data mining by the tech people. So many of these things that we're doing, they're not new. They're 20, 30, 40 years old. So what you need to do with AI is you need to augment what the computer is finding with the theoretical frameworks and common sense and logic. So you don't make the type 3 error that I was talking about, which is solving the wrong problem. What you need to do is you also need to augment the data. So for example, let's say if I can do price variation, whether I'm talking about computers or I'm talking about airline tickets, if I purposefully put in an experimental design that changes the price of computers by the time of the day or by the day of the week or the packages, etc., I can actually do experimentation in the marketplace, and through that experimentation, I can learn a lot more than AI would have produced by itself. So you have to combine AI with the conceptual frameworks in order to make the right decision. Now, having said that, there are lots of things that you will find which become common knowledge. If something becomes common knowledge, then you don't need that augmented intelligence that I was talking about.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's been augmented 10 times. How many times are you going to proofread the same issue? Yeah. Then what happens? Jobs become at risk. And so it's to the testament of the human race that we will find other things to do that the machine hasn't learned of yet. And so there's so many problems to solve right now. If you look at whether it is poverty or it is healthcare or it is education, we have so many things to worry about that I don't think there's a shortage of problems for managers to work on.
We have a lot to learn from people like you, right? So I think very few opportunities like these where we can get to interact. So we're getting a lot of good questions from the audience. I'm reading one question. This is from Subrat Prusti, right? So he is asking, can we have business education in Indian languages, right, in the near future? Perhaps say maybe a Telugu speaking person, who cannot probably, who's not fluent in English, right? And he wants to manage a venture. Right, it's more relevant to grassroots problems also. I mean, as you rightly said, there are so many problems to solve, and should language be a barrier to getting into business education?
Well, you're talking about technology. You've got all kinds of technology that will translate English into Telugu. But I'm ready to teach Hindi. Hindi mein padha lenge.
But yeah. So I mean, okay, this is because I think all the entrance exams are, whether it's GMAT or it's CAT, right? All of them are about English. I think English is a predominant part of getting into premium institutions.
20 years ago, the French used to be really upset, about English. If you ever went through France, they would, if you asked a question in English, they would pretend they didn't even know what you were talking about, even though they understood it. But there's a lot of unhappiness that the French had with the English language. Why has English language come through? You can actually blame the damn computers, okay? So it's because of information technology, it has propelled the English language to the forefront. And now what we're beginning to see is automated translation. So I think things will change in the future, but we really do need to do things at the regional level. Okay, because India has, and remember I was talking about diversity within India. India has 14 different scripts. So if I look at Italian versus Spanish, there's less difference between Italian and Spanish. I mean, they use the same alphabet at least, right?
Yeah.
But if you come from Hindi-speaking, Uttar Pradesh that I come from, how the hell do you read something in Tamil or in Telugu? You can't even recognize the alphabets.
Yeah.
So we do need to, and hopefully this is where technology is going to come in. And but the reality is that a lot of the global stuff is in English. It's not what we do in India, but if you are going to if ISB is going to compete globally in education, okay, it's not going to help us teaching in spending time learning Tamil. I think we have lots of faculty who are Tamilian, and they should contribute at the regional and the local level. I'm perfectly happy to teach in Hindi, at least have conversations in Hindi.
Yeah. One of the questions I had, as ISB, it's all about the alumni, right? Your alumni is your strength. And, we hosted a couple of ISBNs in this series of EdTech Engage, and one of them is Akshay Chaturvedi, 2014 graduate ISB. And so he runs a company called Leverage. So there are many of your alum that are very successful founders of startups. And, it's a great, one of the reasons why even VCs kind of trust, funding people is the IIT or, ISB tag. And, it's of quite a relevance in terms of the value, right? And it's a great token, right, when you go into the market. So in that kind of thing, when you actually, talk about entrepreneurship education at ISB, is there anything specific that, you have learned, or, the culture at ISB that gives rise, gave rise to so many, entrepreneurs from ISB?
We inherit a lot of good people. Where do we inherit them from? We inherit them from the IITs and so on. But we are also very careful in how we look for people before we admit them. Right? So, for example, since I came in, we've increased the number of women candidates in our postgraduate program from 27%, I think, to 40%. So we have actively been looking for smart people, smart women, because the nation needs greater diversity in the management spectrum. Now, it's not simply gender diversity for the sake of gender diversity. We also look for diversity in the people we bring into the program beyond gender. So, for example, if you're an athlete, you'll get a few brownie. If you're a national level athlete, you'll get a few brownie points. If you're a musician, we don't want our entire student body to be of engineers. So, we're looking for people who have, who made a bit of a mark in the arts, in music. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to create diversity in the student body. And the reason why we are creating that diversity is because the people with different backgrounds think differently. So what you need is sometimes you need multiple perspectives on the same problem to be able to come up with a better solution. Now, why are these guys entrepreneurial? I think they may have entrepreneurial genes to begin with. We used to admit people based, of course, on IQ and EQ. More recently, we have started looking for people with entrepreneurial bones, but also we look for people with HQ. What is HQ? HQ stands for heart quotient, people who care about the community, right? So this is because our admissions are not based on pure, what is the highest GMAT you can get. We have turned down people with GMATs of 760. So the leftovers from ISB can go to other great management schools. But what we are looking for people who are complete people. And so I'm really proud to say that when I look at the early batches, as many as 30% of the early batch students have started their own companies. This percentage, I don't think any school can match it. And so now I need to do some more analysis to see what the exact number is and why this is happening. But I've been in touch with senior alums, and they're really entrepreneurial group. They made a mark, and what we are doing to perpetuate that is we are trying to use the senior alumni as mentors. So when we do the orientation week, we call it O Week. It is the alums who run the orientation. Faculty don't run it. Okay, it's the alums that are running the orientation. And so some of the good habits or entrepreneurial habits, etc., are being passed from generation to generation of ISBs. The other thing I joke about is that people ultimately have to pay for the tuition. Once they've paid off the loan, then they get more entrepreneurial.
Right. It is the Guru Dakshana probably. It's the investment, right? I think it's a B school. So you teach investment 101 right from the day one. You invest on the right.
But in the innovation entrepreneurship area, we do have the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship that actually in addition to my dean's job, I'm also the executive director for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We have something called D Labs, which was funded initially by the Department of Science and Technology, and that's an incubator in Hyderabad. In Mohali, we have the Atal incubator. So it's also as a school, we want to engage better with the community. And one of the things we will work on is designing a program for incubator managers. Okay, because in Hyderabad, there must be 60, 70 incubators. Now, who's teaching the managers of these incubators how to manage the incubators?
Yeah. Any guidance to government given from ISB to manage pandemic efficiently and control the economic impact of it? Do you think as a knowledge and tech hub, could we address the pandemic challenges perfectly?
Well, the pandemic, you're asking me a very difficult question because the pandemic has spread globally. In the US, where I am currently, it's going up to well over 100,000 cases every day, and so it is going to, it's going to continue to spread, and the only thing that will contain it is, I think, the development of a vaccine. And there are several vaccines that are on the way, and but the nation is under great stress right now because when you look at our population, it is huge, and as a country, we have done very well. Let me explain what I mean by that. So if I look at the United States, it has 1/4 the population, and the US is now at about 100,000 cases every day. The recovery rate in India, which is about 93%, is about the highest in the world. And if you look at India, which is currently about 40,000 cases per day, the US is 100,000. And 100,000 on one-fourth the population. So if you convert it into India's population, the US rate would have been 400,000 per day. I mean, at the India population level. And the fact that we are at 40,000, 30 to 40,000, means that we have done some things right, and our recovery rate is very high. Now, I'm not a trained physician, so I don't know whether it is hydroxychloroquine. I don't know what is it that about India, whether it is the pre-existing of some antibodies, or that as children we got vaccinated against smallpox and some other. I don't know why the rate in India is so low compared to the rest of the world. But even with the low rate, our population is huge, and so we are facing a very big challenge. And my hope is that in the next 3 months, we are going to have a vaccine. Now, many people may not know India is sort of the vaccine capital of the world. Many of the vaccines that are sold globally are actually made in India. So hopefully when the vaccines come up, we can serve our citizens first, and or at least put our citizens in front of the queue, for getting the cure. But of course, we have variety of ways of testing, etc., and we can certainly use artificial intelligence, etc., to look at the data. But looking at the data and finding that it is spreading is not going to help control the spread. what we need is a solution, and the solution is going to have to be, in the long run, it has to be in a cure and not in a lockdown. Now, the government is trying to do its best to keep things quiet, in the sense of not allowing it to spread very quickly. But the more we can keep the rate low in the short run, then when the vaccines come in, they can really help out.
Teaching is something where a person consume the information and try to simplify it and then produce in front of the class. So there will be a class of students like 30, 20, 60, whatever the number. And only one person is giving the knowledge. And everyone are absorbing the information. So it becomes very plain. Like people who are interested, they just listen and try to get it. But what if a facilitator, he just create a dialogue, he just create that point or the topic and make a small groups of it, and then each one of them have an opportunity to discuss, and hence therefore they discover their own perspectives. So why not that still?
Yeah, but that's exactly what we do at ISP. We do a lot of facilitation, we do discussion, and very
Mhm.
little of the time is spent in
No, no,
straight
no, no.
lecture. Okay,
Mhm.
because the straight lecture you can all put on the internet. And it's the dialogue, the discussion, why not this, why shouldn't we do that? And, we actually work with the faculty, as the faculty, learn very quickly over time, how to get the students engaged.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that ISB does is we do not admit students without experience,
Mhm.
because if people don't have any experience, they don't know how to ask the right question, and they don't really know how to keep a dialogue going. So,
Mhm.
we don't, we are really doing what you were suggesting, Prapun. We actually facilitate learning. We don't teach.
Great.
We don't,
And
we don't lecture. Okay, we don't lecture.
great,
I mean,
great.
we teach. We teach it, but we teach through facilitation.
And what about this information? Why don't it spread to the schools? Because you've been into different bodies, you can suggest or you can recommend. Why have you done any practical testings or approaches on these things? Because the education system in India, especially in schools, are still the same. Why not that? Why not your learnings or your experience can be shared with this younger generation or younger people, so that the teachers in schools also learn this kind of art?
So we do some amount of training, if you will, of people in management schools. We are guilty of not going down to the K through 12 level.
Mm-hmm.
And but I want you to keep one thing in mind, that I joined ISP 5 years ago, and at
Mm.
that time we had less than 40 residential faculty, and now we have about 70. So we've grown about 75%, but we are still a very small school. There are other IMs who have invited me to come and speak to their faculty. I've done that. We are very happy to mentor and work with the junior IMs. We will do that. We do host an annual case teaching, case writing workshop for faculty from around of India. But we're doing it at the postgraduate kind of level. We need to do it at the undergraduate level. And ultimately, we have to sort of train the trainers, and it needs to go through the K through 12 level. I'll tell you a story about myself. When I was in class 6, there were
Mm.
33 students, and I was number 33.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, why was I number 33? I was just not interested in learning. And what we were learning in those days was rote learning. In history, you had to remember the dates. In geography, you had to remember the places. In spelling, you did this, and you learned the mathematical tables, etc., etc. And I did horrible in school. And when I was 12 years old, my principal called in my mother and said he was promoting me to keep the Srivastava family reputation, because my older brothers used to top the class and I was at the bottom of the class.
Mm-hmm.
Well, somehow, one of my friends, the name is Pridarshan Roy, he talked me into taking the IIT entrance exam. I told him, we used to call him Pops, Papa Roy, because he gave everybody advice. You may be listening for all I know. And so I said, look, there's no point in my taking the IIT exam, I'll never get in. So he said, well, if you try it, you may possibly get it. If you don't try it, you'll obviously not get in. So he's the one who persuaded me to take the IIT exam. I went into IIT, and all of a sudden, at least at IIT Kanpur, the conversation changed from remembering a formula to learning how to derive the formula. It came from rote learning to analysis and thinking.
Yeah.
And in the analysis and thinking world, I think I've done okay. But in the rote learning world, I was suffering. Now, what needs to be done is the concept that you're talking about, facilitation, we need to bring it into the way we go about teaching things. So if you look at the undergraduate program, whether it's in engineering or some other area, why don't we balance theory and practice by inviting people from government, people from industry to facilitate learning in the classroom? All right. So that I think would help if the students getting an engineering, let's say from a tier 2, tier 3 kind of school, if they not only learn from the textbook and from lectures, but they also learn from practitioners how things were being done. So actually, we've been reviewing our own programs, the PGP program and so on. And what we have discovered, despite whatever efforts we put in, there is still a shortage of what we call experiential learning. So we need to bring it in, and I think it's not just ISB, but the IITs and the IIMs also have a responsibility to provide insights to the nation. I have a good friend who's from MIT, and he was the president of Singapore University of Technology and Design, and I used to be the provost at Singapore Management University. And we did a joint program. That joint program was combining engineering and management, and the students in 4 years got 2 degrees, an engineering degree and a management degree. Now, what this person did was he made the comment to me, and he's from MIT, so obviously he knows the IITs of the world. He says, India has 2 great brands, IIT and IIM. How come they don't work together more often? Right? So I will extend that conversation to say, why don't the leading institutions in India, whether it is IIT or IIM or it is Narsi Munji or whatever it is, why don't we all work together in order to develop programs to have some sort of a virtual university which we use to train the trainers? Because what we need to do is we need to generate a lot more faculty. And so these are the kinds of things that we are trying to propose to the government, that we really need to come up with a mechanism where we can enhance the quality and the quantity of people who will be doing the teaching. Now, we talk a lot about IT and about, EdTech. Has anybody ever figured out that the people who need EdTech a lot are the teachers of the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grades? Who is putting the effort to making sure that teachers learn how to use IT?
I was going to ask you about learning science. You beautifully said a lot of innovation needs to be done in the area of teaching and, around the aspects of delivering as well. So you also mentioned about, EdTech as one of the focuses, right? In that sense, whether it is adaptive learning or personalized learning, is there a scope you see that ISB can have a center for excellence or a sort of a thing in learning science? Because learning science combines the areas, broader areas like psychology and it's not just tech, but it's more to do with perception or psychology, right? So in that sense, do you see some scope for research? And also, is there a scope for EdTech startups that are trying to get into the space of personalized learning and adaptive learning?
I just started reflecting on this issue about 6 weeks ago. Not
Okay.
because I somehow woke up to this issue, but I have a very good friend. His name is Stephen Miller. And Steve Miller was my vice provost at Singapore Management University. So he was the vice provost for research. So he just sent me a pretty heavy duty PowerPoint talking about learning, how you learn. Okay, so, and he sort of was analyzing some books that have been written on learning, and he was distilling, what are the key elements of learning.
Right.
And so this learning science is an important issue. It has a lot to do with reading, with debating, with digesting. Listening is probably the most important component of learning. So Kashyap, I'm not an expert in this area. Steve Miller has gotten me thinking in that direction, that in order to be a good teacher, you need to understand the learner side of it as well. And
Right.
so this is if you invite me 6 months later, I'll know something more about it. But
Sure.
all I know that the learning has a lot more to do beyond teaching, because listening and debating and evaluating and reevaluating and testing, these are all part of the learning process. We often learn a lot by making mistakes. And society is not very respectful of people who make mistakes. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that we're making, that we don't let people fail. So if people fail, um, it's like, what do we want people to do? We want people to be resilient. If they fall down, we want them to get up. And if they fall down again, we want them to get up once again. But if we let if people fall and we say, what kind of an idiot are you that you tripped? that is not good. So I think, Kashyap, this is a serious topic, and maybe what we can do, and this is going to be especially important for EdTech, because EdTech is not able to spend as much time on the interaction component. So what is it that could be done in curriculum design to maximize learning given the constraints that we have?
Absolutely. So do you see some scope for research? I mean, in
No,
terms
I
of
see a lot of scope for research. I mean, what Steve Miller sent me is about a 90-slide presentation. So I wrote back to him and saying, look, I'm handling the pandemic right now, but in January I'll have more time. So I mean, he wrote to me for a purpose, and he's an incredible man. And maybe if you want me to invite him to your talk, I can persuade him.
Have a panel discussion. So, I mean, before we kind of close, we are almost at the end of it. Specific to strategy. I mean, one of your previous interviews, I don't remember with whom, but there was a topic that he was speaking on. How to have a strategic mindset. As managers, right? A lot of facts and knowledge can be taught, but you said specifically, the mindset part of it, and because you're a professor of strategy and marketing strategy and innovation, right? And in fact, you taught business model innovation recently as well, right? So in terms of perspective is probably the hardest thing that one can get, and it takes a lot of time, lot of probably the social interactions to a lot of environmental kind of reasons as well, right? In terms of purely right as a professor of strategy, like how do you accelerate the process, right? Students, especially when they come to ISB, it's a very power packed, extremely fast paced kind of thing. It's a 1 year super hard thing, and my interaction with several friends who have done it, it's extremely hard, in terms of the whole schedule, right? So as a professor and in strategy, right, it takes probably the most amount of time to get people into the strategic thinking as such, right? So how do you kind of accelerate this process, right, in students?
So, what we do, I mean, I can talk about what I do in my course, and different
That'll be
faculty do
helpful.
different faculty do different things. But one of the problems that we have is, and this will be a problem with AI as well, is when you analyze the data, it's from the past, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, supposing I told you, Kashyap, that I'm a very safe driver. So, if you want a ride to the airport, I'll give it to you. But the reason I'm a safe driver is because I'm always looking in the rearview mirror and making sure nobody hits me from the back. And so he said, Raj, so what about the windscreen? Do you look ahead? I said, no, only when I have time. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't think you'll want to go to the airport with me if all I'm doing is I'm looking at the rearview mirror. Now it's okay to talk about looking at the past, learning from the past, if your industry isn't changing very much, right? So yesterday's thing is going to happen tomorrow. But if tomorrow is going to be so different from yesterday, you better learn from the future. Right?
Yeah.
So you look at all the leaders you've had. You look at Gandhi. All right?
Yeah.
You look at Abdul Kalam. What were they talking about? They were talking about that you need to have a vision.
Right.
You need to have a dream.
Dream. Yeah. Right.
And then you need to figure out how you're going to get there. So one thing about strategy is there is no one solution. So one element of it is you need to envision the future and how you're going to get there. The second thing that I talk about, which will be very useful, I believe, to anybody in EdTech, is to look at this whole issue of value creation. How are you creating value? Okay, is it some of the value could be created because of the channel, the interactive channel, the media. Some of the value is being created because of insights. So, information technology cannot create the insights. So what you need are people who have insights to be able to.
Absolutely.
The third thing you're going to need is, customer connect. You need to be able to listen to people. So these are what I call customer-facing processes. Right? But then you have to say, how am I going to deliver these things? So then you come back to the capabilities. So strategy requires the focus on the future. It's going to require how are we going to deliver what is the value that customers want? But then you also have to figure out how are you going to deliver it. All right. But the third element is what I call value appropriation. Okay, at the end of the day, how are you going to capture value? Not only deliver value, but how are you going to capture value? So the course that I teach in business model innovation, I've actually been teaching it since the mid to late 90s. This is not new. And what we talk about is principally value creation and value appropriation. And then all the other mechanisms that are needed to do this. And but principally, it's going to strategy. Let me just put it this way: without the capabilities of executing, strategy is not going to lead you anywhere. Without strategy, execution is simply wandering around trying to find something to do.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. It's such a relationship of paradoxical. You have to do one, but you also have, simultaneously, you have to do both, right? I think you have to be an executor as well as a strategist if you were to go ahead, right? So in terms of open innovation, right? ISB as an institute of excellence and par excellence, right? The concept of open innovation is a little new to India in terms of giving out knowledge and collaborating, and the IP generation, doing it collaboratively, right? Germany and few other countries especially have seen a lot of models of our open innovation, right? Specifically in terms of that, has ISB done some open innovation sort of things to speak?
Open innovation, let me just step back and say there's a big difference between industry and academia. Academia has always been about open innovation. Okay, what do? When we learn something, we teach it to our students. When we learn something, we publish it. When a private organization thinks that they have a better trick Yeah, they
They
want to
don't.
hold it. They don't want to share it. They don't want to show it.
Right.
So if you think of academia, we have
Yeah.
always been open innovators. We absorb ideas. We don't give a PhD degree till somebody has come up with a new idea, and then we force that person to publish it. So we develop our reputation based on open innovation. My reputation in part is determined by the number of people who cite my work as a
Right.
motivation for their work. So if you go and do Google Scholar Rajendra Srivastava, you will
Yeah.
find that there are over 20,000 people who cited my work. I have impacted not only my students, but I have
Right.
impacted about 20,000 researchers.
More other research. Yeah. Absolutely. Any books that you would recommend in strategy and innovation?
Open innovation, a lot of companies are trying different things. So one way around open innovation is you get your customers involved. The customers give you ideas. And this kind of open innovation has been used by the corporate sector for, well, I'd say at least 2 decades. And certainly in the tech world, this has gone on a lot. If I go back to the 90s, many of the software were using open innovation. But also with open innovation, you get a lot of confusion, because you get a version control problem, right?
Yeah.
So
The IP
this
problems
is
also.
this is actually one of the reasons why Unix had a bit of a problem competing with, let's say, Windows NT. And the reason was there were so many versions of Unix, nobody knew what the hell people were doing with it. So you do need control. You need to control the chaos. And but the open innovation also means that there has to be a mechanism by which the people who are contributing to the innovation get some benefit. So Kashyap, I can't say, give me all your best ideas and I'm not going to give you anything in return. All right. So it has to be a two-way street. And these days, there's a lot of talk about, what we call ecosystems. All right. In the, 25 years ago, I was calling ecosystems market-based assets or networks, market-based networks. The idea was that, if you look at Google, Google is more valuable if there are more apps available on Google, right?
Right. Yeah.
So similarly, now if I go back to 1995, if there were more applications that were running on Windows, it became more useful than Macintosh at that time. So what killed the Mac in the mid-90s was not another hardware company. What killed the Mac in the mid-90s was Windows, because they had more applications that were running.
Right.
So what you need to do is at that point in time, Apple was being very proprietary. Okay, they didn't want to share the benefits of commerce. And on the other hand, so what that led to was Apple on one side and everybody was on the Windows platform on the other side. So was Apple going to win on its own against Compaq and Dell and Hewlett Packard and IBM and everybody else? The answer is no.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Wonderful. I mean, any specific books that you would recommend on strategy or innovation at large?
If you look at probably the most popular book is about 50 years old now, written by Michael Porter, or at least 45 years old, Competitive Strategy. In this day and age, with knowledge being generated all the time, I would continuously kind of scan the web, and because there's all kinds of papers that you can pick up, whether they're from the McKinsey Quarterly or you're getting from the Harvard Business Review or the Journal of Marketing and so on. And so I would, on innovation, I mean, of course, there are, the all kinds of books that have been written, but the space is so broad now that I would have to ask you a question: what aspect of innovation? And because the answer to everything in innovation is there's only one answer: it depends. Okay, the answer to everything is it depends.
But yeah, I think such a broad area, right? I think services has its own scope, product innovation, then business model innovation, and you have so many things on open innovation itself, right?
Pick up some books on platform thinking. And
Platform thinking.
I mean, there are
Yeah, I think
plenty of people who've written on it, but the more successful companies are really creating platforms for others to compete on. So, I mean, for example, I talked to my fairly successful friends in the IT industry in India that, we don't have any of our own platforms. And so we write programs, we write applications that run on SAP, that run on Oracle. So the harder we work, the more money Oracle and SAP make. And right now, so if you look at Amazon, you look at Google, these are all platform companies. Okay, other people are working on those platforms. Now, India has probably the world's best platforms. So you look at Aadhaar. Through KYC, Know Your Customer, we have a tremendous public platform. So what Amazon knows about Amazon customers, and it's a private platform. In India, a small company can benefit from UPI and Aadhaar and so on and so forth, because what we have with the India stack, we have the world's largest digital platform. And we have not figured out how to capture value. So what's happening is Facebook is making money in India through WhatsApp, etc., with the largest customers for Facebook. But all the value is being captured in the stock market in the US. And we need to figure out how to use the India stack. And this is one project that I'm working on, namely, how can India, we take State Bank of India, and they have a product called YONO. YONO stands for You Only Need One. Now, in terms, I don't know any US bank that can match the State Bank of India in the quality of services that are being provided by YONO. With YONO, you could use your debit card to get money from your mutual fund account. Nobody in North America can do that. So it's about time India started exporting its digital expertise in finished products, not by working for somebody else.
So, I mean, just to end this thing in the context of EdTech, right? Do you have a model where EdTechs can approach you in terms of a platform-based thing, right? Where ISB can create a platform for EdTechs to come and collaborate.
Can't make any promises, but this is something that we would be interested. So what is needed in EdTech is really a learning management system, because a lot of value in education is created by certification. Okay, we take our teaching very seriously, but we take our evaluation even more seriously. And so it's not just a question of do we have Zoom, do we have Teams, do we have WebEx to teach, to communicate. It is the learning management system, people submitting their assignments in time. Can we validate that this is original thinking, or they simply copied something from the web and cut and paste? So we use a program called Turnitin to figure out what percentage of the paper is cut and paste and what percentage of the paper. So it's really the learning management system that is going to be very important in EdTech, because the value that the student is getting, of course, is in learning, but the value is being recognized by somebody who's putting trust in hiring this individual through certification.
Right, absolutely.
If you want to create a project, ISP can, work with you on this project, because we are spending time on EdTech ourselves, but our model is likely to be quite different from a startup that is going into undifferentiated. I mean, let me look at it this way. If you think of a French restaurant versus a Punjabi dhaba, what's the difference? Okay, the difference really is in one you have small volume but high margin. Okay, and ambiance and quality, tara. At the other end, what you're saying is, look, I'm going to settle for small margin, but I want to educate a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with either of them. Now,
Hmm.
would ISB be dancing on both sides of the table? I don't know. Companies have tried it. Harvard is trying to do it right now. But I'm very happy to take this on as a project. If
Yeah.
the startups that want to work with us on it, we can certainly entertain the idea. And I do run the Center for Innovation, and we can embed it in that.
Great. I mean, happy to know. So I run an EdTech as well. So I've been in EdTech for the last 5 years. Made a couple of products. I mean, one is a learning technology. An LMS, an advanced version of an LMS. We power engineering colleges, and the other is creating an emerging tech university, a digital university for emerging tech. So we are also trying to get more project-based learning and experiential learning imbibed into the virtual sort of learning. So that's how we are rethinking a lot of things there. Happy to share what we are doing. I think probably we can find means of collaborating if it's sensible. Yeah.
I may have more time next year. Right now, by next year, I mean January or so. And
Sure.
right now, my hands are full with.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the vaccine. The day the vaccine shows up, I'll be able to spend more time. I mean, we can chat on the phone a little bit, but
Yeah.
it took you a long time to catch me for 20 minutes, so we could have a conversation about what we would do today. So time is
Yeah.
at a real premium right now because we're fighting COVID every day. But as soon as the vaccine comes, I'll be able to work.
Sure, sure. I mean, that's great. Firstly, I mean, thank you so much. I think it's been about 1.5 hours. I mean, just got so much of gyan. Gyan is unlimited. I think a lot of people have many questions, but I think I can probably mail some of the questions. So thanks, Rajendra. It was absolute pleasure hosting you. A lot of insights, I would say. So it was an absolute pleasure to kind of talk and chat with you. Yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, I like I'm probably one of the few administrators who actually teaches, and even when I was running Singapore Management University with 10,000 students, I was teaching every year I taught. So I think there's no point being an educator if you don't teach. That's my personal mantra. And
Oh, fantastic.
so I
That's,
hope you guys got something out of it. And thank you for
we did it.
handling it, Kashyap. As I told you, I didn't have really any time to prepare for it. So anything that you've asked me, I've answered from the top of my head. And
Oh, it was fantastic. It was absolute pleasure. I mean, a lot of insights. I think I'll come up with a blog. So I'll also share a blog with the insights and with the kind of stuff that was shared. A lot of people, perhaps it could be common knowledge to you, but it is really insightful to a lot of us. So I think we'll definitely come back to you on more tangible sort of work that we can do in the tech space.
All right, and just to give you a heads up, in about 3-4 months from now, I'm going to start writing a book, not a long book, maybe 120, 140 pages at the most. But the book would be focused on how to manage education. And my expertise is more in management schools, some in engineering. So I'm not going to give gyan about liberal arts and so on and so forth. But when it comes to turning around, that was one of the questions that was asked. What should tier 2 universities do? And tier 2 engineering schools do? That was the precise question that was asked. So that is exactly what I want to do, because in India, we need to help these universities recover. And there are several things that need to be done. I'll give you 2 or 3 from the top of my mind. One is we need to bring in more experiential learning. So there needs to be a greater connect between industry and these academic institutions. That's one thing. The second thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be better governance in terms of, so I'll just kind of go out on the side for a minute. At ISB, we have very, very strict honor codes. Okay, so, we talk about this thing called Turnitin because, we don't want people to simply copy things. We want people to think. And copying doesn't mean that you're thinking. And so we take honor codes very seriously. And if you know,
Yeah.
not going to get into details, but in
Yeah.
baseball, which is not an Indian games, they say 3 strikes, you're out. At ISB, it's not 3 strikes; it's 2 strikes and you're out. Okay, so you have to be serious about processes.
Yeah, I think the more you talk, you have wonderful insights to share. As an educator, it's been phenomenal. I think one last takeaway is, that if you're into the management of education, I think you better teach, right? As you're one of those exceptional kind of people that teach as well as manage institutions. I think more number of people just when they become head of institutions, they just do the administration part of it. So the love for teaching, I think that's something that we all can learn. I think there are very few teachers who have become administrators. Very, very few of them. So I think it's really nice to. Yeah.
Kashyap, I'll add one more thing. Not just teaching; it is also continuing to do research.
Wow.
One of my very good friends is a guy called Tom Robertson, and Tom and I worked together. He used to be a deputy principal at London Business School. That's when I met him. Then he talked me into moving from Austin to Atlanta when he went to Dean at Emory University. And then from Atlanta, he moved to Wharton as the Dean at Wharton. And so, I obviously hold him in very high regard. He called me a few years ago and said, Raj, we need to do some research together. And we've been talking about a lot of things, but we haven't written anything. And so I said, Tom, you did $600 million for Wharton. You've done your share. You don't need to do it anymore. He says, Raj, in our profession, you're only as good as your last research paper. I will move it beyond teaching. So you're only as good as your last good idea. And so I would like anybody in this room wants to be an educator, put on your thinking cap.
Wow, that's really nice. Last advice. I think so phenomenal. So thanks again. I mean, the more we speak, the more exciting it gets. The more insights you have been giving. So it's very nice. I think there are many points to to work on, and certainly look forward to next year when the vaccine is out and you're back to India, and perhaps we can share more and work on a platform based thinking. I think that is my personal takeaway, right? I think ecosystem building and platform thinking is going to be the future, whether you're in edtech or any other area, and keeping your thinking hats on, right? So thank you so much, Raj. Again, it was really wonderful having you. Thanks for all the time. You've spent considerable time given your busy schedule. So thank you so much. Thanks once again.
Take care, Kashyap, and take care everybody who managed to hang along for so long. It was meant to be 40 minutes, and I think you got double the time.
Oh yeah, more than double time. So thanks again. Take care.
Right.
Take care.
You too. Bye, guys.
Bye.